Hi, what kind of military does Germany need, and does it have it? What is the current state of the German military? How ready is it for war, and could it plausibly fight a hypothetical war with, well, you guessed it, the Russians? I intend to address these questions. My name is Michael Shurkin, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Pax Americana, a conversation about world affairs, global conflict, military strategy, and anything else that happens to be on my mind. Now, before I start, just a reminder, if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. And, please subscribe if you have not already. Back in 2017, when I was in the RAND Corporation, I published a paper that looked at Britain, France, and Germany's ability to generate and sustain a heavy brigade. And the study I did, the work I did on Germany, revealed significant challenges that the Bundeswehr, the German military, faced with regard to operational readiness, and its very mixed record with respect to transitioning from a force that in the 2000s was really all about fielding an expeditionary force to Afghanistan to dealing with major land warfare in Europe again. I put a link to that paper in the description. 2022, I published an article in War on the Rocks that expanded the scope to the entire German military. And that was year I published it basically a month after German Chancellor Olaf Scholz came out with he proclaimed it Zeitenwende, which means like a historical turning point. And of course, this was all about the war in Ukraine. Scholz promised to increase annual defense spending push it up towards 2%. And he also announced that there was going to be a 100 billion euro spending spree, intended to help the Bundeswehr get back up to speed. He also promised that by 2025, Germany would be able to field a full division. I think it was the 10th Panzer Division that they had earmarked for this. Now, the point of my article in 2022 was to talk about how bad things were in the German military, and they were bad, and to examine what Germany might do with all of this money in order to sort of get itself back into shape. And I put a link to that article also in the description. So now here we are in early 2025, and the question is, how much progress have the Germans made since 2022, and what kind of state is its military? I'm going to divide this video into several sections, and yes, I put timestamps below in the description so that you can jump around. In the first part, I want to talk about, in general terms, about the kind of military that Germany needs. In the second part, I want to give an overview of the Bundeswehr, its basic size and structure. I don't want to get into too much detail, but just an overview. In the third section, I'm going to talk about what the Germans have done with the 100 billion euro splurge that they went on and that I think they're still going on, and also its current budget, and how much progress they made. And then finally, in the fourth section, I kind of want to wrap it up with some overall observations. Part 1. What kind of military does Germany need? Now, in earlier videos that I made about Canada and Ireland, I made the argument that neither Canada nor Ireland really needs to spend a dime on defense, other than for the sake of asserting their own sovereignty, which is actually an important thing. And I bet the Canadians are probably valuing that even more than they did before. Neither country really faced any threats, and both of them could count on powerful friends and neighbors to protect them. I also made videos about Poland and Finland, which were very different situations because those countries faced direct threats on their borders, and happily those countries were taking those threats very seriously. Their militaries and their military plans and spending programs reflected the seriousness with which Poland and Finland took the threats on their borders. Germany is an interesting case, though. Germany faces threats, not on its borders, but close. And also Germany is Europe's largest economy, and I think it might be the largest country in the European Union. It should be a reliable pillar of European security. It should have a powerful military. It can certainly afford to have a powerful military. And moreover, whereas the British and the French sort of got these policy choices about, are they going to be like big European continental powers, or are they going to be global powers with ambitions of global force and force projection, etc.? The Germans don't have that. They don't aspire to be global powers. They shouldn't aspire to be global powers. It's really all about, well, they know who the threat is. The threat is Russia, and they need to prepare for fighting the Russians. And if you need to know what that's all about, you just have to look at the war in Ukraine, and it becomes really very clear. Of course, this issue is all the more pressing given what Trump's done, his apparent abandonment of Ukraine, and the abrogation of America's post-1945 role as the principal guarantor of European security. The Europeans need to start, they need to wake up. I also really want to insist that the American, British, and French nuclear guarantees cannot and should not be relied upon for European security. There are several reasons for this. One is that given everybody's reluctance to use nuclear weapons, and that's a really good thing, right? But given people's reluctance to nuclear weapons, there's still actually a lot of space for conventional warfare. The other thing is that you never want to be in a situation in which you're basically defenseless, and your only option is either to acquiesce to aggression or use nuclear weapons. You want to have options. You want something to be more than like all or nothing. And the in between all or nothing is conventional military capabilities. And this reason alone is why it's very important, even for nuclear powers like Britain and France, to have potent conventional military capabilities, and why the rest of the Europeans cannot and should not rely upon the British and the French and the Americans and their nuclear arsenals. They need conventional military capabilities. So what kind of military does Germany need? Well, basically a large one. And it needs one that's geared to fight a large land warfare, a large-scale land warfare against a land power, Russia. And that's basically it. A large army that can fight and can stay in that fight. So does Germany have that kind of military? Part 2, overview of the Bundeswehr. First of all, just a little bit of nomenclature. Bundeswehr refers to the entire military, all the military branches combined. The German army is known as the Heer. The Air Force, of course, is the Luftwaffe, and then there's the Navy, the Marine. The Bundeswehr is an important word for Germans because it marks that the Bundeswehr, that's the federal force, the federal army, meaning of the Federal Republic, which makes it a very different beast from the, well, frankly, the Wehrmacht of the Nazi era. Unfortunately, the name change also communicates something else. So, like, whereas the Wehrmacht was once the scourge of civilization, and the Bundeswehr is something far more docile, perhaps too much so. It's like Germany exchanged their rabid baby-eating Doberman for a tail-wagging Labrador Retriever. Who's a good boy now, right? So now, prior to the Ukraine war, probably everybody thought that was really for the best. Nobody actually wanted Germany to have a powerful military. But I think these days, a lot of people, including some Germans, have come around to the idea that, well, maybe they need not just a larger dog, but a dog with a little bit more fight in it than what they actually have today. According to the data that I've been able to find from various official German sources, the Bundeswehr, as of December 2024, has 181,150 active service men and women, and about 34,000 reservists. They'd like to have far more reservists. I read somewhere that they want at least 100,000, but that seems to be a distant dream. The Germans have really struggled with recruitment ever since they got rid of conscription in 2011. By the way, it wasn't always like this. In the Cold War in the 1980s, the Bundeswehr had 500,000 people in it, and the German army alone had 340,000 people in it and 12 divisions. It's amazing to think. 12 divisions. Again, of course, this was during conscription. Now, the approximate breakdown is as follows, and these numbers are, I believe, are as of 30 November 2024. The Army has 61,500. The Navy has 15,500. The Air Force, 27,000. There's something called the Streitkräftebasis, or SKB, 22,697. Cyber and Information Warfare Information Space Service has 3,800. And then the Central Health Medical Service has 20,408. Now, these numbers are important, and among other things, one thing that's really important to stress, particularly if you want to do like an apples-to-apples comparison, let's say with the British military or the French military, whatever, is that a lot of the people that other countries would count as, let's say, the army, the Germans don't. The Germans count them as SKB, or Cyber and Information Space, or the Health Service, right? Which means when they say that they've got 61,504 people in the army, the Germans are actually undercounting. Because again, a lot of the people that actually functionally are part of the army are not technically part of the army, so they're not included in those numbers. So, for example, the SKB, the Streitkräftebasis, what is that? A lot of the SKB, these are logistic units that do logistics for the army. You also have things like dog units, I think NRBC units, I think military bands, all sorts of stuff that support the army, but technically aren't army, so they're not counted as such. Now, of those 22,697 people in the SKB, the Streitkräftebasis, I believe that most of them are functionally part of the army because they support the army, but some of them also support the Air Force and the Navy, which means that I don't really know how many of those people we should count as part of the army. Most of them, I think, but I don't actually know, and certainly not all of them. This is also true for soldiers that are in the Cyber and Information Space Service or the Central Health and Medical Services. Now, why they divide it this way, I don't know. Some of the Germans, like I asked on Twitter, and some Germans said, well, it's just so that you can create more command positions and have more jobs for more generals. And apparently the German military is very top-heavy in generals and admirals. Maybe that's why, I don't know. Maybe this is the way the Germans have always done it since all the way back to the Prussian era, but again, I don't know. But either way, again, this makes it sort of hard to do an apples-to-apples comparison. So Let's say the British Army. The British Army has 74 to 75,000 people if you include the Gurkhas. The Germans, well, officially 61,500, but probably most of the SKB plus a lot of the other guys. So probably I'd say that the German army ultimately is larger than the British army, maybe as many as 80,000. Okay, so let's go service by service, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but just some basic facts. So the army's got 3 divisions. It's got 2 armored divisions, the 1st and 10th Panzer Division, plus something called the Rapid Forces Division. These are like air assault, airborne, special forces. They've got a tank fleet of about 310 Leopard 2s of various kinds, which they're modernizing. The Germans also have 350 state-of-the-art infantry fighting vehicles, the Pumas, at least 50 more on order. They also have 550 Boxers, again, more of them on order. They also have 51 Tiger attack helicopters but apparently the Germans don't like them. I don't think anybody likes their Tiger helicopters. So they're getting rid of them. They hope to reduce the fleet to 24 by 2032. And to replace them, they have ordered up to 82 H-145M helicopters, which probably very capable, but not quite the same thing as a Tiger. One area of concern for the Germans, like everybody else in NATO, is that they disproportionately cut their heavy artillery forces after the end of the Cold War, so they're racing to catch up. From my research, I found that the German army today has 134 of the excellent PZH-2000 self-propelled 155 millimeter howitzers with 10 more on order. I don't know if that number includes the ones that they gave to Ukraine or not. They've given a lot of stuff to the Ukrainians. Plus, they have 35 to 40 M270 MLRS variants, right, the multiple launch rocket systems. In January, the Germans placed an order for 5 Israeli-made Pulse, P-U-L-S, MLRS systems. As for air defenses, the Germans also, like everybody else in NATO, have really underinvested in air defense capabilities since the end of the Cold War, and they're racing to catch up. I've read that they've been buying lots of Stingers. Also, they've bought this thing called the Sky Ranger 30, which is an air defense thing mounted on top of a Boxer. They have ordered 18 of them. I think the first one just entered service into the German army. They've also been buying Iris-T, SLM, and SLS systems. I know that they gave some of them to Ukraine, so I don't know if the numbers I've seen include the ones they've given to Ukraine or not, but they're buying as much as they can. There's also something called the Leichtes Flugabwehr system, this sort of light, short-range thing that they're buying. I don't know how many. The Germans also have some Patriot air defense missile systems. Now, for the Luftwaffe, for the Air Force, from what I read, they have a combat fleet as of February, 232 aircraft, including 143 Eurofighter Typhoons and 89 Tornado fighter jets. It's worth noting that they're trying to modernize the fleet. They've ordered 53 new Eurofighters and 35 F-35As. The first one's supposed to be delivered in 2026. The F-35 is supposed to replace the Tornadoes. By the way, only in 2022 did the German army finally, after years and years of hand-wringing, finally said, you know what, we're going to buy some armed drones. Germans are really weird when it comes to armed drones. It seems to trigger some sort of World War II PTSD, maybe because they're too similar to the V1 or the V2, or I don't know what the story is, but it's been this long, tortured process. They apparently have ordered 140 Israeli armed Heron drones. I do not believe they are already in service, or any of them, that they're still going to be delivered, or maybe a few of them are. It's not really clear. I just know that they finally committed in 2022 to go ahead and actually do this thing. I've also looked into whether or not the Germans have been buying newer things like loitering munitions, and it looks like they're flirting with it, and they're talking with the Israelis about buying some Israeli systems, but I don't believe the Bundeswehr has actually gone ahead and ordered these things. As for the German Navy, as of February 2025, the German Navy has 28 combat vessels, including 11 frigates, 5 corvettes, 6 submarines, and 6 mine countermeasure vessels. The frigates come in different flavors, the F-20, 125, 124, 123. Don't ask me what the difference is. They have different kinds of corvettes, and they have placed orders for more. The 6 new F-127 frigates to replace some of the older ones, the 3 Sachsen class, the F-124s. And they've also ordered some more submarines. They've also ordered 18 unmanned future combat surface systems. I do know that they've ordered a bunch of the Boeing P-8 maritime patrol aircraft, although from what I read just a few days ago, they haven't gotten delivery of any of those, and Boeing has only just finished one of the ones that they've ordered. So they haven't even been delivered yet. So slowly. All this kind of sounds okay, right? I mean, it's a bit on the small side, particularly the Army, which is really the important thing. But the bigger problem with the Army is not really the size. It's the fact that they are arguably hollow. These are hollow units. They have too few people. They have too little of their equipment is operating in operational condition, and they just have too little stuff and too little training. And from the way the German army has operated for really the last 20 years is that they only have enough stuff to be able to meet their immediate requirements. So when they were in Afghanistan as part of ISAF, the Germans had enough stuff so that the units that they sent to Afghanistan were fully equipped. Likewise, the units that they would send to be part of NATO training missions, NATO exercises, would be fully equipped. In recent years, they have a force in Lithuania. Those guys are fully equipped. But in order to do that, what they would have to do is cannibalize all the other units, scrape together everything, and hand it to the people who needed it right then. But that was it. Like, they had nothing more. And that's the way they've been operating for 20 years. And this is what they need to overcome, to catch up for. And there have also been some embarrassing incidents. For instance, recently there was a revelation that the F-125 frigates, and these are huge, expensive, they can't operate in the Red Sea. Why? Because they can't defend themselves against Houthi attacks. So they just had to send one of them home. Now, a large reason, I think, for the deplorable state of the Bundeswehr's operational readiness is defense spending, which until 2024 was well below 2% of GDP. Of course, for an economy the size of Germany's, 1% of GDP even is a lot of money, but for reasons I don't fully understand, the Germans have gotten very little for their money, especially if we compare with the French or the British or the Italians, right? Which I also did a video about. Now, the Italians really seem to get a lot of bang for their buck in terms of their defense spending. Part 3, the big Zeitenwende splurge. As I mentioned, in 2022, Germany's chancellor announced that they would raise defense spending, push it up towards 2%, and also spend 100 billion euros. That's a lot of money. So in 2024, the German defense budget reached 52 billion euros, or about 2% GDP, plus they spent an additional 20 billion, which came out of that $100 billion fund, euro fund. So a total of 72 billion euros. Now, just by point of comparison, the French defense budget in 2024 was 47.2 billion euros, and the UK's budget is about 57 billion pounds, I think. Now, remember, the British and the French, they have smaller budgets, but they also have comparable size, if not larger, militaries. Plus, they've got big aircraft carriers. They have for nuclear deterrence. They have nuclear-tipped submarines, nuclear missiles, nuclear-powered submarines. Somehow, it's really weird. Like, where's the German money going? And is it making any kind of meaningful difference in terms of the state of the Bundeswehr? Part of Germany's challenge is that it needs to do 3 things at once with its money. It needs more stuff, meaning it's got to grow. It needs newer stuff, meaning it's got to modernize. And then it's got to keep the existing stuff operational. It's got to keep things working. So the most obvious thing that the Germans have been doing with their money is modernization. F-35s, Pumas, Boxers, updated Leopards, the P-8s. They've ordered more ships, more subs. Plus, they've been spending big on air defenses. Oh, one item of note that I forgot to mention before is that Germany in 2023 contracted with Israel to buy the Arrow 3 anti-ballistic missile system for $3.5 billion. What the Germans have not done with their money is grow the military. It's mainly been modernizing. It's not clear to me that they can grow the military without reinstituting conscription, because they're having such a hard time with conscription. But the real big question is, what about operational readiness? Has that improved? The answer seems to be mixed. Like, some things yes and some things no. Some things are in better shape, but other things really aren't. And there's still serious doubts about German army units' ability to fight because of their poor readiness. There's also the question of stocks. The Germans have included in the Zeitenwende splurge just a long shopping list of things: shells, ammunition, rockets, missiles, etc. But where are they now? Some of it they've given to Ukraine. Some of it it's just scheduled. It will be delivered eventually. It's been described as how they've gone like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And it's not really clear that they're any further along than they were back in 2022. The German government has not, to my knowledge, published any readiness report since 2022. If I'm wrong and you say, oh, but Michael, that's not true. In 2023, the Bundestag did this report. Please let me know in the comments, ideally even with a link so that I can go and read the Bundestag's report or whatever. But I haven't seen anything since 2022. So a lot of the available evidence for German readiness is anecdotal. So, for example, there was a Reuters report dated 13 February 2025, based on interviews with high-ranking German officials, that said that the German army is really a long way away from its goal of having a division ready for war in 2025. Also, the other division, big armored division, according to the same report, is only about 20% equipped. Right, so it's in bad shape. The solution ultimately is more money, and also means that after the 100 billion euro splurge is done, they need to make sure that they keep spending at 2% because they need to have money in the program for more stuff and for maintaining the things that they have. And the other thing that you need is time, because all the things that the Germans have ordered is going to take a while to be delivered, and then once it's delivered, you've got to integrate it into the force, and etc. Meanwhile, the German Ministry of Defense apparently is very worried about the lack of equipment for the reservists, the just basic equipment they don't really have. They've set themselves a goal of having full readiness or full equipment sets for the reservists by 2035, which is a long way off in the future. So we'll see how that works out, particularly since they're trying to grow the reserve force. I'm left with the assessment of the Bundeswehr historian Sönke Neitzel, who wrote this book, Sönke Neitzel. It's interesting enough, but the Germans seem to have a really small ecosystem of like defense analysts and people who comment on this stuff. Even compared to the British and the French, they have a lot more, and certainly compared to the U.S., with RAND and all these other institutions that do nothing but sort of study this sort of thing. But anyway, Sönke Neitzel is one of the few German real experts on the Bundeswehr, and he's been saying a lot in the media. And he's been saying a lot of things, and basically what Neitzel has been saying is that the Bundeswehr is really not up to fighting anything in any real meaningful scale. And it doesn't have the stocks to stay in the fight. So, for instance, in October of 2024, he appeared on German television, and he said that in the next few years, the Bundeswehr can't fight. In the same program, he told the audience, wir können hoffen, dass die Bundeswehr nie kämpfen muss. We can only hope that the Bundeswehr will never have to fight, because it can't. It's not ready, and it's taking too long. On 14 February 2025, so really just a few days ago from when I'm making this video, Neitzel spoke again on television, and he said that the Bundeswehr in some ways is better off than it was in 2022, but in other ways it isn't. And among other things, it hasn't kept its promise of having a division ready for war by 2025. And he says that one of the key reasons why I can't do this is because it doesn't have drones and doesn't have air defense capabilities, which, according to him, means that you really can't fight, not in 2025, not in light of what's going on in Ukraine. He also said that the German Air Force and the German Navy aren't really any better off than they were in 2022. So concluding thoughts here. Now, I'm going to be blunt. In light of the American stance on Ukraine and comments by Vance and Hegseth at the recent Munich Security Conference, Europe really is in trouble. We're back to the 1920s when the United States walked away from Europe and European security and left everything to Britain and France, while Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc. were really left to fend for themselves while praying that the British and the French would defend them as they promised. But they didn't. Now, some of the Bundeswehr's problems are those shared by every other Western European military. So, for example, none has adequate industrial capacity. German industry makes exquisite top-tier weapons, Leopard 2s, Pumas, Boxers, etc., but at great expense and very slowly. So, and they don't have adequate stocks of anything, and they can't make anything quickly, at least not at scale. They've got only a few things, and they can't replace them. Germans also really inexplicably have obtained remarkably little for their money, which is why even though the French, it's really, when you compare with the French or the British or the Italians, they all have smaller defense budgets, yet they all seem to be in better shape. Neitzel says that a big part of the problem with the Bundeswehr is about mentality. And he lays the blame on the German government, on the Bundeswehr, for not waking up and not reforming itself and not really catching up to the reality. The reality is that there really are serious, concrete security threats here and now on the European continent. They're too comfortable with American security guarantees and with this thinking that they could get away with having a hollow force. But they need a change, and he says they haven't really changed. One of the things that Neitzel says is that the German approach to war ultimately today is to avoid it. That's their strategy. We're going to stay out of war. And he says that if that's your approach to war, you're never going to be ready for war. You need to sort of accept the reality that war is a possibility in order to actually get ready for it. So you need to sort of change the mentality and change the paradigm, the way the Bundeswehr and the German cabinet and the German public think about these things, so that they can stop talking, start doing, and they can make sure that they're getting more for their money and they're moving faster, because they haven't been moving fast. And according to Neitzel, it's just been talk for really many years. Now I'm going to leave you with a reading recommendation. The reading recommendation is from Ulrike Franke. Ulrike Franke is one of the best of the German defense analysts. And as I said, there's really a very small world of really like high quality defense analysts. Ulrike is one of them, Ulrike Franke. And in May of 2021, she wrote an essay for War on the Rocks called "A Millennial Considers the New German Problem After 30 Years of Peace." And Franke is trying to explain why it is that her generation of Germans just can't and won't take defense things seriously. The fact that they have really embraced this idea that history is over. Because for Germans of her generation, Fukuyama's right. It's over. They don't have to worry about it, and they have this vision of the world as being this kind of Kantian utopia of rational discourse, and we can all get along and negotiate, and we don't need to have any kind of wars or anything like that. So Franke writes, she says, "We've intellectually and practically disarmed. As we never had to train our strategic muscle, it atrophied. Power politics is at odds with our understanding of how the world works. We don't have our brains wired in this way. We don't speak the language. And thus, we are utterly unprepared to face opponents with different interests who are increasingly vocal in questioning what we thought was ultimately the only system." She continues, "We have a generation of Germans that have taken things for granted and struggle to answer challenges. Secretly, my generation hopes that all will go back to our normal soon, and so that we can move on from this unenlightened power politics to address real challenges like climate change. But," she adds, "the world is unlikely to do us that favor. To be up to this challenge, my generation will need to train its strategic muscle, and fast." Thank you very much. If you like this video, again, please hit like and subscribe. Also, stay tuned. There's a lot more in the pipeline. And if you go to the description, you'll see I put links to the articles I mentioned, including Ulrike Franke's. Also, you'll find links from my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Blue Sky, what else? And also my own website, michaelshirkin.com. Oh, and my Substack, which is also called Pax Americana, and I write for that weekly. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.